So the first thing that I want to do is to apologize for anybody who's listening to this online for the absolute garbage audio. And to you guys who are going to get the garbage audio on parts 2 and 3, you know, it is what it is. So, there we go. That should help us sync it up. Okay. Let's take a look at this paper. We have a student who has written sensation-seeking personalities. We are missing a last name and page number. So then we're going to go page number in the top right-hand corner. Top of page, aligned right. Then we'll double-click up here. Now, sometimes you'll notice the cursor over here on the left side, right? And what we want to do is bump that over to the right. This is our alignment left, center, right, and then type in whatever the student's last name is. Okay. We have a due date, which is fast approaching. That's good. A title, that looks good. Let's scroll down and check out our works cited page. Our works cited page looks pretty good. The things I'm looking for here, by the way, we do have hanging indentations. That's great. We also have it in alphabetical order by last name. That's great. We want to hit either Control Enter or Command Enter to put it on a new page, because the works cited page should be on its own page. And note where the cursor is, by the way. When I do that, I want it to the left of that capital W. Now, let's see, a couple of notes here on this works cited page. We do have these links in here. These are optional, I want to say. Some professors will prefer you include those links. I don't like them very much, just to be frank. I find they tend to not work. The DOI does tend to work as a document identifier, but the links, even if they're stable links, tend not to work that much. And you can see this is also really long. So let's just see what happens. This is currently at 2,240 words. If we put a period in, we save ourselves 8 words, right? So we can go through and I think this is probably going to give us a good bit if we just stop our citation there. And that's perfectly fine, by the way. It's perfectly fine to do that. So again, remember our starting point was 2,240, right? Is that right? Did I say that? 2,240? Sure, you say. Why not? So we're 80 words down. That's good. All right, now let's go through. The next thing I'm going to check is where are the in-text citations. I'm doing a visual check for authors. Okay, that one's highlighted, so that's nothing. We're just going to clear that formatting there. And I noticed this says The Atlantic. I also remember seeing The Atlantic in the, hold on. I'm going to Control F for Atlantic here. So the only citation from The Atlantic actually has an author with it, Allegra Ringo. So let's go back up to our first one with the citation. We want to put Ringo in there. I also happen to know that The Atlantic has page numbers on everything it does, and so we do need a page number here, you know, whatever that may be. So if I were revising this myself, what I would do is I would go back to that original article, find where I was getting this information from, and include the page number there. Not a super important change, but one we're going to make. Okay. So I see one in-text citation. Where's our next in-text citation? We have Steinberg finds. Okay, good. So right here we have a citation like this. It's good that we have go away thing on the screen. I don't. It's good that we have this note here that this needs a citation. But what we want to do for MLA formatting, because we've said Steinberg throughout, is we don't need to put Steinberg in the parentheses. We can just do this. Whatever that page number is goes there. And then we also want our punctuation to be at the end. So just to remind you what it looked like, there was a period, and then there was the citation. We want just the page number because we've mentioned the author's name throughout here. I mean, if you look. Not Stenenberg, that's wrong. Look at how many times we're mentioning the author's name. So we don't need it here. Adriana Galvan. And same thing here. So this is just a way this student has done this, which is fine, not a huge deal. But we want to, if we've got that author, we don't want to put the author's name there as well. Let's only say it once. Now, I do have another question here. So let's look at the nature of this information. Let's zoom in just a bit. This causes adolescents to possibly act more impulsively. So I have a question about this. Does this sound like something that comes from the source? Is this conjecture that the source made or that the author made? It's not abundantly clear to me where this goes. It might need to go here. However, based on where this citation is, the implication is this is a conclusion that the author is drawing. That's fine. I would have to read the paper to know one way or another if that's appropriate. But make sure that if this is a conclusion from the source, that it goes before the citation right there. All right. Same deal here. We don't need that. We can just put that page number in. Cool. I do wish that we had a page number here. My concern is this reads very much like an abstract and not like super specific information. We'll have to see where it fits contextually, though. So we can see a kind of pattern developing in this source. Have you guys noticed it? We're essentially walking our way through the annotated bibliography, and it is lit review-esque. We want to make sure, though, that we're not just redoing the annotated bibliography. And part of the function of the annotated bibliography, and I'm by the way, I'm not just deleting all of these like this. Anytime I'm seeing the authors mentioned, like this is Ringo and Zold right there, then that's when I'm deleting it. When we use the annotated bibliography to write our paper, part of the goal is to condense that material a lot, right? We want to condense it down so that we can communicate the core facts that we need to build our case as quickly as possible. We're already on page 6 here, and we're basically going one by one with these articles, and so there's a narrative element that I'm concerned narrative's the wrong word, but there's an element of kind of cohesion and direction that I would expect in a paper that I'm afraid is going to be missing because we've just narrativized the annotated bibliography. Wayne Baker. So this is one where I might not delete because of Engelhart and Baker, this article. Again, we want punctuation inside for quotation marks, outside for parentheses, whether it's. So we have an issue in this paragraph. Let's take a look here because this is something that is relevant to how we cite, right? Ronald Engelhart and Wayne Baker used research to support their argument concerning the changing values in American culture in their article, Modernization, Cultural Change, and the Persistence of Traditional Values. They show that modernization leads to cultural change. The authors say that this happens as citizens move from traditional values to more secular, rational values. They found through surveys that traditional values such as religion and conservative views and as large families have declined in America, it becomes more modernized. Okay, so this sentence has some problems here. So one of the things we want to make sure we're doing, if we have an interjection like this, or an aside, right, offset with those commas, if we delete it, the sentence should still read correctly, right? They found through surveys that traditional values and as large families have declined in America, it becomes more modernized. That sounds strange, right? Like, so we need to rework this whole sentence, which we'll do in just a second. However, traditional values have and will not disappear because of strong foundation of cultural values versus the slow pace of cultural change. Okay, now we have Lynham and Miller, but that's not these people, right? So where is it coming from? This doesn't seem like the right citation to me, right? So this is a first-year writing class, right? The class that we're in is a first-year writing class. This is not the kind of thing, like I would take points off for this, but this is not the kind of thing that I would be like, hey, you fail everything now, right? I wouldn't do that. However, let's say you're in graduate school and you do this, and your professor notices that your citation doesn't match up with the source. This could be an issue of plagiarism, even if it's unintentional. At that level, it doesn't matter, right? It's sort of like, well, I just thought of a really vulgar example, so we won't use that because I'm recording. But we don't want to, even if it's accidental when you're in your majors courses later on, or if you're in graduate school, even an accidental plagiarism, it counts, right? There's no distinction between, your intent is immaterial. So this is indicating that this information comes from this source, and I'm almost positive it doesn't, right? Because of the nature of the source and the nature of this information, the title and this information. Now this right here does seem to come from this source. Daring and dangerous acts have a history of being celebrated in American culture, right? This does seem to be about this stuff here, right? So my guess is that is where that citation goes. That's my guess. Again, I don't know. But we have another issue here. What's the relationship between this section on cultural change and then daring and dangerous activities? I don't really see the relationship. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter there, but that also helps to clear up where the information from Engelhart and Baker ends, which can be right there, and the information from Lynham and Miller begins, which would be right there. Now on to Breimer. Yeah, I won't lie, right now this reads a little bit like a report. All right, and then we end with a kind of balance claim. Okay. So, if we are, my initial thoughts on the function of this paper and how it's working is that it's good, but we've got a lot we can probably remove because it doesn't feel like we're answering an incredibly narrow question. And to me, what I would want to go a step further than what is presently here and ask the question, like, what does that balance look like? If the claim is that sensation seeking is something that needs to be balanced, where and how and according to whose values? And the author here does acknowledge a number of very important things, primarily the fact that culture plays a significant factor in this, right? But culture also plays a factor in determining what we would consider balance, right? And also what we consider risk-taking. Everybody gets into a car and drives, but that's one of the riskier things that we do, right? Lots of people die in car wrecks. You probably know someone who's died in a car crash, or knew someone, I guess I should say. Moreover, in the United States, we have lots of guns, right? Number one killer of kids from between what age? Like 12 and 19 or something like that is gun violence. That's risky, but I don't think any of us feel that risk when we wake up in the morning necessarily. I mean, it depends, but nobody wakes up and is like, ooh, the scariest thing I'm going to do today is get in my car or be around guns, right? That's not really what we think of as like risky. We're more concerned with things like, oh, I have a test or an assignment. Whereas someone who's not normally exposed to getting in a big metal death box and traveling at, 80 miles an hour on poorly maintained roads, or being around unhinged people with no access to mental health care and lots of access to guns, if you're not used to that, you would probably consider that a risk, especially statistically given, that those are likely to be the ways that we're going to die. Well, for you guys, I'm past that age now. I'll probably die of a heart attack or something from drinking too much caffeine and not sleeping enough, and my very poor diet. So there is a tough question here of what constitutes balance and how does that sort of factor in. And what I would like to see, instead of listing these sources, which kind of is what's done here, is the author doing more to relate them to one another. To make a claim and then to say, and this source supports this claim, or these sources support this claim. And that can help us jump through a lot of this as opposed to structuring it in the way that it's structured right here. So we're at 2,190 words. I think that it's probably possible to get this down to 800 or 900 words. We would just have to start taking, instead of summarizing these sources fully, determine which points we want to make, and then seeing which sources support those points and using our citations in a more efficient manner. Keeping in mind that it is not your job when you write a paper to inform your audience of everything that your sources say. It is your job when you write a paper to make claims and then to support those claims with citations. The function of the citation is to act as the support. You don't need to talk about the nature of the study and how it was done. You can say, this is the relevant statistic, or this is the relevant, conclusory finding, citation. And then you can move on. And so when we have full paragraphs for each source right here, this reads essentially like an essayized version of an annotated bibliography. So we're going to work on changing that and making sure that we can be more efficient with our sources. So let's start with this introduction. And in starting with the introduction, what we'll do is we'll get a direction for the paper and then see if we can narrow it down. Sensation-seeking personalities have a great need for new, interesting, and intense experiences. Those that possess this quality are frequently regarded as thrill seekers who delight in taking chances and experiencing novel feelings. They frequently seek activities outside their comfort zone because they are inspired by the pleasure and stimulation that comes from new things. Even though seeking sensation can be a good quality that helps people extend their horizons and increase their knowledge, it can also have detrimental effects if used excessively. Studying the psychology of sensation seeking might help us better understand why some people are attracted to novelty and excitement more than others, and how this tendency may affect their lives. Okay, quick, just sort of pop quiz is the wrong word here. Just if you know, why did I delete this comma? Yeah, it's got an and right here, but there's no comma before this conjunction. Why not? So this is a conjunction that's combining two sections, but this, which is its function, but this section is not a full sentence. How this tendency may affect their lives is not a full sentence. Are attracted and how. And this is if we were to do our parenthetical, or sorry, our somebody help me, prepositional phrase deletion, if we went through and did that, it would be clear that this is a compound verb and that we don't need a comma before this and. May affect them lives? I don't think so. Don't trust your grammar checker. It'll make you say may affect them lives, which is fine, if you are speaking, but not so much if you're writing. May affect them lives. Them lives over there. Okay. So what is this paper about? It is going to be something about sensation-seeking personalities and the psychology thereof. It's geared us towards understanding and the effects. So to me, the more interesting question here is what constitutes balance? And if we want to know what constitutes balance, I think the relationship between the psychology of sensation-seeking behaviors and what they are is that's something you definitely need to explore, because that is what allows you to understand if something is sort of like a mental illness, right? If there is something wrong with the way that the brain is absorbing dopamine or something like that, if regular everyday life just feels like two-dimensional and flat to you, that is probably something that we can address as a mental illness. So you don't need to go, I don't know, what's a bad sensation-seeking activity? You don't need to rob stores for fun, I guess. It's okay to rob people sometimes. I just watched Robin Hood yesterday with my son, and the old Robin Hood, the Disney one with it's a great movie. Kind of a communist movie, though, I won't lie. It's a little bit of a commie movie. It's about the redistribution of wealth. I don't know that it would get made today. Disney knows who butters their bread. So I'm not sure. I think we need a little bit more of a specific direction with this paper. And I think the question is, how do you balance, or what constitutes balance in sensation seeking? Or how far is too far? And maybe that's what the paper explores, but I don't necessarily get that in this introduction. So let's snip up the introduction a little bit, see if we can shorten it. Let's read it one more time and then look for things to change. Sensation-seeking personalities have a great need for new, interesting, and intense experience. So one thing we can do here is we can get rid of have a great. We can just say need new, interesting, and intense experiences. I also feel like we can get rid of interesting. And the reason I think we can get rid of interesting is because it is sort of by definition interesting to these types of personalities if they're new and intense. That's what constitutes interesting for these people, according to the research that we've got below. And so we can just say new and intense experiences, because really what we're talking about is what makes them interesting, and that's the fact that they're new and intense. Those that possess this quality are frequently regarded as thrill seekers who delight in taking, we can just say these thrill seekers. We don't. That's a lot of words to say those that possess this quality, right? When we say these thrill seekers, we know we're obviously referring back to this first sentence, to sensation-seeking personalities. And then we can just say, these thrill seekers delight in taking chances and experiencing novel feelings. We can also shorten this by saying novelty. We can even shorten this more by saying delight in risk and novelty. They frequently seek activities outside their comfort zone because they are inspired by the pleasure and stimulation that comes from new things. I don't know that we're adding anything here, right? This is another way of saying they delight in risk and novelty. Even though sensation seeking can be a good quality that helps people extend their horizons and increase their knowledge, it can also have detrimental effects if used. So, while sensation seeking can help people extend their horizons and increase their knowledge, increased knowledge is a lot like extending horizons, right? Extending horizons is a metaphor. It's broad. It would cover increasing your knowledge. So we can just say extending horizons. It can also have detrimental effects if used excessively. Studying the psychology of sensation seeking might help us better understand. Let's be more directive. Will help. So this is a nominalization, okay? This word right here, studying, is a nominalization. Nominalization, if you sort of think about the parts of that, if we say something is nominal, or we would mean like in name only, right? Nom name. Okay, so we're at the root of name. Nominalization, ization at the end is basically turns it into, right? So this has been turned into a noun, if that's what nominalization means. Because the word study is a verb, right? And so when we put ing on the end of it, one of the things that we do with verbs when we add ing is we make them into nouns, right? Run is a verb, but I can also say running is fun. And that is a noun, right? It's in the subject position. And so nominalizations are okay. Sometimes you need them in order to make sense of an idea. Sometimes you need a nominalization as your subject. Like the sentence running is fun. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And there's nothing grammatically incorrect about this sentence either. It's because it didn't know it was part of that sentence. That's why I was trying to correct it. But it is better to have a non-nominalized subject, a subject that is a character or a person. And I think that's part of what the issue is here. Studying the psychology of sensation seeking might help us better understand why some people. So we can better understand But there's also this last element we want to include, is the effect on people's lives, right? We can better understand attraction to novelty and excitement by studying the psychology of it. This is a terrible sentence. We can both assess risks and better understand attraction to novelty and excitement by studying the psychology of sensation seeking. That's not terrible, actually. It's okay. Okay, so I know from scanning the paper earlier that a lot of this is going to be about what goes on in the brain, right? And from sort of what this is saying initially. So we have this sentence: while sensation seeking can help people extend their horizons, it can also have detrimental effects if used excessively. I think taken to the extreme might be a more semantically accurate way of phrasing that. We don't use sensation seeking. We are sensation seekers. We can better understand these extremes and find balance through understanding what happens in the brain when we experience novelty. Okay, let's read this first paragraph now. Sensation-seeking personalities need new and intense experiences. These thrill seekers delight in risk and novelty. While sensation-seeking can help people extend their horizons, it can also have detrimental effects if taken to the extreme. We can better understand these extremes and find balance through understanding what happens in the brain when we can experience novelty. Okay, so we probably need some transitional phrases in there, but since we're in the cutting phase, I'm just going to leave it as is. When people experience thrills, the sensation begins in the amygdala, which is a fun word to say, the portion of the brain that generates emotions and assesses the unknown. The amygdala lights up as it encounters risk. It then produces a cocktail of neurotransmitters, including dopamine, adrenaline, and endorphins, to prepare the body for what is about to happen. The amount of each chemical released is determined by the perceived risk. What's the problem with this paragraph? Where's the citation? It is not common knowledge that experiencing a thrill that sensation begins in the amygdala. It's not common knowledge at all, right? Speaking of, was it Adam Sandler? Abdullah Oblongata. This list of neurotransmitters, right? And the relationship between the perception of the risk and the amount released, this absolutely requires a citation. This is also the type of thing, and this is one of the reasons why an annotated bibliography is important and documenting your work is important, because as you are reading, or as you read all these sources, as you read about the brain, if a number of sources have as part of their just like quick review to catch you up to date this information, this can be something that you do know, right? That you have internalized, which is good. However, when stated like this outside of the context of, citing a source with no citation, it is represented as though the author of this paper is someone who knows these things independent of a source, as in the author was someone who did this research his or herself, right? And so we don't want to imply that. So this is a big no-no here to have information like this without a citation. Researchers are constantly disputing why certain people enjoy thrilling or intense experiences while others avoid them. One perspective accounts for the differing amounts of gray matter in people's brains. So let's talk about the difference between peoples like this and peoples like this. It should be like this. I'm wrong. I don't know why I did that. Gray matter in people's brains. But this is a fragment here. Wow, the grammar checker is really off today. One perspective account. No. Accounts of the different grammar. One theory is that people with thinner sections of gray matter tend to perceive threats as being less serious. Okay. So this is another introduction. Right? We're down to introduction 2. So let's read introduction 2 and then we can decide which one to keep. Researchers are constantly disputing why certain people enjoy thrilling or intense experiences while others avoid them. One perspective accounts for the differing amounts of gray matter in people's brains. We don't want to say one theory is that people, already got one perspective accounts. Contending that those with thinner sections of gray matter tend to perceive threats as being less serious. The physical effects of experiencing a thrill include a rise in testosterone, vision getting smaller, narrower, and an increase in heart rate, which causes adrenaline to be released into the body. When heart rate increases, the body diverts oxygen to the brain and causes a sensation that can last around 60 seconds, followed by another wave of chemicals that elevate mood. Ringo. This is the biggest motivation for thrill seekers to repeatedly make risky decisions. In this paper, I will present how psychosocial, biological, psychological, and cultural factors play into the curation of a sensation seeker. Curation. Maybe creation? Okay. So now we're down to almost 2,000 words, right? We've deleted about 250 because this is the second introduction we've got, and we don't need 2, right? This is also narrower and more specific. It's just saying this paper is going to be about how we create a sensation seeker by these various factors, right? Okay, cool. This is narrower and I like it. So what we have here is essentially an outline: psychosocial, biological, psychological, and cultural. So 4 different sections. So I'm just going to go here and do this. That's not even... How many times can I misspell that? Cultural. Okay. So let's find all of our psychosocial paragraphs. And I'm going to make these bold. Drop a little break in there. Okay, so psychosocial. This is about adolescence. Psychobiological. This is biological. Okay, so this paragraph right here that we're looking at is all about a certain personality type. Let's talk about what's happening here really quickly. Okay, so Ringo uses research from David Zald. In this case, it's probably best to go look up that original research yourself. You want to avoid citing what someone else has said about a work because you're sort of filtering degrees of interpretation, right? So now if I represent David Zald's research based on what I'm reading in this paper, and then you hear my explanation and you tell someone about it, it's like a game of telephone. But the thing about research is that it's documented. You can go look at that research yourself, right? And so that's probably a better approach to actually go cite Zald, himself. Okay, now we're on to culture. Another one on culture. More culture. Okay, this one doesn't need to be here. It doesn't really fit. We can probably get rid of that one. Moreover, though, we have this setup of these are going to be the ways we look at it. Where is it? All the way up here. That it's going to be psychosocial, biological, psychological, and cultural. We never really have a definition to differentiate psychosocial and psychological, and it's all kind of mixed together with biological as well. There's a lot of that. We do have a section on the cultural, though. So I would probably rearrange these, actually. From what I understand of this topic, looking at this paper at this point, the initial thing we need to look at is cultural, right? Because different cultures are going to assess fear and novelty differently. Or biological, one of those two. We should start with biology or culture. If we understand the biology behind it, then that may be actually a better place to start. So I would probably start with the biology. Part of the problem, though, is that this introduction is also kind of about biology, right? I think we can take this section right here, this introduction, and make this a more individualized narrative, okay? So what I would do here with this first section is I would describe the physical sensation itself. Instead of doing it in sort of these clinical terms, I would go through, and sorry, I've got too much. So let's just do this really quickly. Put our hormones together there. And we'll put some emphasis here. There we go. Okay. So now we have a brief sort of this is a sort of narrative introduction. We're going to put right up here. What I'm trying to do, by the way, just to make this so... Wow, the grammar checker is really off today. What I'm trying to do is create clearly defined sections in this paper and make it, frankly, kind of more papery, right? As opposed to just, here's a list of things. We're trying to get kind of a direction behind it. Sort of understand the elements of, sort of the elements of thrill seeking, or the elements of this, of these behaviors. We're hyphenating this throughout, aren't we? Yes. Oops. Okay, so instead of saying that researchers debate this, I'm posing it as a question, which is totally fine. We're going to talk about our research and we're getting there. By posing it as a question, I can imply that my paper is going to answer it, right? It's all, you don't want to lean too much on this where every paragraph begins with a question, but you can do it, relatively frequently, right? Why do some people enjoy thriller? Well, others avoid them. It's also, not having a citation here is really tough. Is it 2 L's? Yep. Okay. We're making progress. We're down to 1,962 words. And again, I think we have a long way to go. Stop trying to correct the grammar thing. But we're making some progress. Okay. We had to include this, by the way, because that's where we're getting some of this information, right? So we have to include the name there. Okay, let me find this word psychosocial in the paper. Psychosocial. I need to look up this word. I need a psychosocial. I need to be able to differentiate this from psychological for myself. Psychosocial versus, my phone keeps blowing up, sorry, versus psychological. Okay, so this is saying right here, what's the source on this definition? Difference between .com, I don't trust that. It says the word psychosocial is used in the sense of mental behavior of the society as a whole. And so I'm not sure that I would be able to differentiate that from culture significantly. Is there not a better... Okay, it looks like Wikipedia is the best I'm going to be able to do for now. The psychosocial approach, although the Wikipedia article begins, this article needs additional citations for verification. The psychosocial approach looks at individuals in the context of the combined influence that psychological factors and the surrounding social environment have on their physical and mental wellness and their ability to function. So, if psychosocial is about the relationship between the environment and psychology, I would probably combine that with culture, because that environment is going to be a cultural environment. Since we don't have a citation for this gray matter section, we didn't, did we? I've changed this around enough, but I think in the original we didn't. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. But we now have we're in 1950 and we have a kind of clearer outline. So biology, psychology, and psychosocial and cultural factors. Now, note how I did my list here, by the way. So I've got items in a list, so comma, and, but you'll notice I've got another and here. And so the reason I put psychosocial and cultural factors at the end is because I want to group them together. But if I put this in the middle of my list, it's going to be really unclear, right? So, but biology, psychosocial and cultural factors, and psychology all play a role. Sounds confusing. The fact that that's got that extra conjunction in there makes it sound confusing. And so I'm going to keep it this way for now. This is something that I might go back and look at as, when I'm revising, if I were going through this again later, to try and attempt to break up, or to combine, rather, psychosocial and cultural factors into one heading. And that may be cultural, it may be psychosocial. I'm leaning towards psychosocial. And then the resulting arrangement would be psychosocial factors include culture. Here's how that plays in. And that would give me a 3-section list. In a 3-section list, I would go biology, psychosocial factors, and psychology all play a role. So biology, individual psychology, and group psychology, essentially. So we're at psychosocial here. I'm going to color code this. This is psychosocial, so I'm going to highlight that. Am I in the highlighter? No. I want to highlight this way. We'll do yellow for psychosocial. We're still talking about teenagers, so we still want this to be yellow. Now we're in biology. Okay. This is specifically, it looks like evolutionary biology. So I'm going to color biology blue. Blue for bio. Talking about dopamine, this is again, this is biology, although at this point we're in neurobiology, so the line between biology and psychology is blurring a bit. Okay, type T personalities. Personality type is going to be psychology, right? So we will do pink for personality. That's bright. Wow. Chemistry rather than personal choice is biology. So biology is blue. Cultural effects, we're back in psychosocial now, right? And then another culture. Culture. What do we say culture was? Yellow, right? Or psychosocial anyway, yeah. Extreme sports. Psychoanalytic, sensation speaking, and the type T theory we already talked about. The idea of freedom. I don't know that this one really, this does touch on all three, but it doesn't really give us it doesn't add anything to the discussion, in my opinion, this section right here. Especially because the conclusion is that it gives freedom to people, or the idea of freedom, or the concept of freedom. It's not that that's not interesting. It is interesting, and I'm sure it could be relevant in a paper. But this paper, as we are revising it, is narrowing the focus on psychosocial / cultural, biological, and psychological, right? So we're going to get rid of this. We'll also need to do extensive work on this conclusion. Let's read the conclusion and see how it matches up with the rest of our paper now. In conclusion, sensation seeking is a personality trait that drives people to seek new and intense experience. While this can lead to personal growth, exciting adventures, and newfound freedom, it can also have negative consequences if taken too far. Research into the psychology of sensation seeking has shed light on the role of neurotransmitters and brain structure in this trait. Additionally, multiple factors contribute to sensation seeking, including psychosocial, biological, psychological, and cultural factors. By understanding these factors, we can gain a better understanding of why some people are more drawn to sensation seeking experience than others, and how this tendency may affect their lives. More research is still necessary to draw more conclusive results. However, existing research has provided an extensive understanding to date. Ultimately, a balanced approach to seeking out new experiences and managing risk is the key to enjoying the benefits of sensation seeking while avoiding its potential downfalls. I don't think this conclusion is, as we have revised the paper, really concluding our our revised approach. So our revised approach is more about how each of these sort of relates, right? Why are some people more inclined to take risks? And my understanding of the research as I have reviewed it in this paper is that fundamentally it is about biology, and that psychology is a way of labeling what happens biologically, and that the psychosocial factors and the cultural factors can determine what someone assesses as a risk, but that the locus of control is biological. So if we're thinking of it like, for the video people, I'm making hand motions. If you're thinking of it as a point where this is what determines or what makes someone thrill-seeking, then perception plays a role in that, and that perception is governed by psychosocial and cultural factors. but it's the biological response that is the motivating factor, right? And then for us to assess it, then we can label it, with this sort of psychological terminology. Of these type T personalities. And so it seems to me then that if we want to control our risk-seeking behavior, that the locus of control is primarily on culture and environment, right? If you have a culture that promotes a certain type of risk-seeking behavior or says this is risky, then that's what allows you to control risk-seeking behavior in a healthier way, right? I think that's a reasonable conclusion based on my understanding of this research. But we now chopped it up. I'm going to go ahead and take this. I'm going to take this conclusion out because I don't think it adds anything to the paper right now. We're down to 1,693 words. When we rearrange this, we're going to take this yellow and this yellow, and we're going to put them together. And one of the things we're going to do when we put these two yellow sections together, and I'm in my next class I teach, I'm going to do this. So you'll be able to go see this happen if you want on YouTube in a little bit. When we put these two yellow sections together, our goal is going to be to not have individual paragraphs that are all talking about one source. We're going to try to, in the same way that we've color-coded the document at this point, I'm going to pull out all this yellow, and I'm going to color-code the yellow. We're going to get rid of the colors there. We're going to color code that and say, can we group some of these paragraphs together? Can we talk about cultural things at large, and instead of reviewing the research and recounting what it says like we did in our annotated bibliography, just state the conclusion and the citation, and the conclusion and the citation, and then say, if those two things are true, then here is now my opinion on them. And so instead of the sources being the paper, the sources become the context for asserting a new point. And we can probably shrink that yellow section, which right now is, I believe, the longest section, down to about 300 words, maybe 400 words, from where it is right now. I'd guess between 700 and 800 words. And that'll actually get us below our minimum word count, but we can go farther than that, right? We can keep bringing this down. So the first thing that has to happen, in review of this process, the first thing that we did was we got rid of our first introduction because we actually had two introductions. Okay, and getting rid of that first introduction not only saved us words, it also revealed to us a more specific direction. When we had a more specific direction, we can see that our conclusion isn't actually concluding our new direction. So we can get rid of that too. And when we have made it clearer that our approach, and this was actually already clear in the original, but we've reiterated it now. When we made it clearer that we are looking at specific elements, we can then go through the paper and highlight those elements, and we can see that there's a big split, right? That we've got psychosocial here and cultural down here, and that because we defined our terms, we know these probably need to go together, right? These are both about group dynamics. These are both about the relationship between environment and psychology. And so because those are so closely aligned, we need to pull them together. We can pull them together and then get rid of redundancy. That's our next step. So you can also see, I hope, how if you had outlined this paper already, that a lot of this work would have been done for us. You could see where you needed to move things. I don't expect you to move through papers as quickly as I do because you haven't looked at over 1,000 of them every year for the past 12 years. But if you've got an outline, that's kind of what this helps you to see. So, yes, I'm going to stop the recording here and resume it in a minute. Right. So, I'm going to rid myself of my gum. Quick recap. I understand you're not ready for a recap, but what we're doing is we're looking at a student paper, and we are actually treating this in depth today. So all of the classes that I'm teaching today are on this paper, and I'm not going back to the beginning. We're going all the way through to continue revising. So you will have missed the first part if you were looking at this now. We're starting here, but that's okay because it'll be online and you can watch it if you want to see me do a whole paper. And if we don't finish, that's fine, because I have another class, and we'll do it then. And if that class doesn't finish, that's okay. I'll finish at home. And basically, we're going to edit this whole paper, though. The whole thing, all the way down kind of as small as it can be. So to give you an idea of where we started, this paper had, as far as the surface level stuff went, formatting was pretty on point. There were two introductions, essentially. A false introduction, which sometimes happens, and then the real introduction, which we got to. And the real introduction gave us an outline. That basically said, we have these elements that lead to thrill-seeking behavior, right, or risk-taking behavior. And they are biology, psychology, psychosocial factors, and cultural factors. Now, I combined psychosocial and cultural factors after looking up the definition of psychosocial, and it said that basically it's the relationship between psychological factors and the environment. And so I felt like it was possible for us to combine those two things together. Then I went through the paper, and since we have this outline at the beginning telling us where everything is, I highlighted each section. Yellow is for psychosocial and cultural. Blue is for biology. Pink is for psychology. That's right, P, psychology. It took me a second there. And so you can see we should have all of our blue together, all of our yellow together, and all of our pink together. But we go yellow, blue, pink, blue, yellow, right? And we don't want that. We want to treat everything entirely as it is. Now, to be fair to the author of this paper, the two separate yellow sections I have are psychosocial and cultural. And this author had those as separate entities. I think they're closely aligned and can go together. So the element we are at right now, or the step we're on right now, we've gone through and we've made it a little bit more organized throughout, and we've deleted some extraneous things. But now we have all of our psychosocial and cultural factors here. I've put this into a separate document, made it single-spaced. I can zoom in just a bit, can't I? I can. Big words. A separate document, and we're going to look at this in its entirety. The number one issue I've seen so far with this paper is that each individual paragraph reads too much like an entry into an annotated bibliography. Instead of the sources working together to support a point the author is making, the author is reporting on each entry, and it reads like an annotated bibliography, essentially. It's a list of this source says this stuff, this source says this stuff, this source says this stuff. Then when we get to the conclusion, which I have already deleted, when we get to the conclusion just says, and that proves it, which I think that the sources actually do indicate something, yes, but we haven't had a chance yet to really see what that is because we're not in the author's mind. I know my conclusions, and I can make some guesses, but we want to be a little bit clearer. So that's our goal. And right now what we're doing is we're going to try and take all of this stuff and crunch it down. It's currently at 603 words. Let's go for, what do you say, 200? I think that's pretty reasonable. Let's read it. When discussing psychosocial factors, researchers often compare adolescent and adult brains and behaviors. Lawrence Steinberg, one of the world's leading experts on adolescence, discusses the variables that are in play in decision-making when it comes to risky behavior in adolescent versus adult brains. Steinberg points out that taking risks is a standard and adaptive part of teenage growth, but it can also lead to harmful outcomes. Steinberg finds that the difference between adult and adolescent brains is not a lack of logic or reasoning abilities, which are well developed at the young age of 15. Instead, the difference lies in psychosocial factors that inevitably take more time to mature. These factors include the ability to resist peer pressure, regulate emotions, control impulses, and the need for instant gratification. Steinberg puts this into perspective by describing the brain functions of an adolescent as a competition between socio-emotional and cognitive control networks. When a teenager is alone, their socio-emotional network is not functioning at a high rate. However, when they are excited or around peers, their brain function can overpower their cognitive control functions, resulting in more risk-taking behaviors. And then a citation to a page number. Common knowledge includes the fact that a large majority of teenagers will make mistakes that their older selves would simply avoid. Adriana Galvan explains teenagers' tendency for reward sensitivity by suggesting that adolescents are more sensitive to rewards than adults. Because of their increased sensitivity, adolescents gain more pleasure and motivation from earning rewards. This causes adolescents to possibly act more impulsively. The question now is, do adults who show such behavior do this because of the same or similar reasons, or is it something completely different? In Louise T. Higgins' article, Cultural Effects on the Expression of Some Fears by Chinese and British Female Students, she investigates how cultural distinctions affect how female students from China and Britain express their fears. According to the study, Chinese students showed lower levels of fear for many different fearful items or situations. Furthermore, the author explains that the Chinese participants showed lower levels of fear because they have been better trained on how to handle dangerous situations, allowing them to feel more secure in their ability to remain unscathed in dangerous situations. However, the biologically relevant fears, or evolutionary fears, did not exhibit any cultural differences. Evolutionary fears are dangers that our ancestors learned to fear for survival, such as darkness and heights. Only the fears that are learned socially showed cultural differences. Ronald Inglehart and Wayne Baker, what a name, Ronald Inglehart, use research to support their argument concerning the changing values in American culture in their article Modernization, Cultural Change, and the Persistence of Traditional Values. They show that modernization leads to cultural change. The authors say that this happens as citizens move from traditional values to more secular, rational values. They found through surveys that traditional values, such as religion and conservative views, and as large families have declined in America, it becomes more modernized. However, traditional values have and will not disappear because of the strong foundation of cultural values versus the slow pace of cultural change. Daring and dangerous acts have a history of being celebrated in American culture, which can breed daredevils. American media frequently promotes people who take risks and push their limitations. I think praising daredevils and sensation seekers in this way is done from a traditional cultural mindset. On the other hand, individuality and uniqueness are more commonly praised, which may similarly inspire people to take on such a unique personality. American culture allows sensation seekers to excel in our society by praising them because of learned cultural values. That was, at the very end, a lot of fun to say. Sensation seekers to excel in our society by praising. A lot of S's. What susurrations we find. Okay. Do you see what I mean when we're looking at these sections, that it feels like I'm reading entries in an annotated bibliography? Right? This isn't working together towards a point necessarily. It's information, and like all, millennials, I consume information like I consume, fast food, which is frequently, and whether it's good or not, I don't care. I just like information. So I enjoy it in that sense. I think we can all agree that there's a certain cadence to this. It's not written badly. It is, generally speaking, mechanically and grammatically correct. This is the kind of stuff that I dare say many college professors would go, good, you've done the homework. Because what they are looking for is someone to report on the fact that they have read and acquired knowledge, and I think this student has clearly done that. However, the purpose of this assignment, the purpose of this paper, is to write an essay, not to report on knowledge, and those are different, especially when we consider the follow-up assignment of we're going to try and move this out into a broader audience, right? We're going to try to communicate this more broadly. And if that's the case, we have to be asking, how does it influence our audience and who does it connect with? So, the question that we came up with, and if you watch the beginning of this, you'll see, the question that we talked about was, what is the primary factor in motivating risk-seeking behavior? Or can we understand a model of risk-seeking behavior? That understanding leads to control. This is a question that the author has in the paper, but it's surrounded by other stuff that distracts from it. Once we revised and edited, that question kind of emerged as the central question. So we're looking at the impact of cultural and psychosocial factors here. Okay? So, what I think we could be best served by at this point is essentially a paraphrase of each of these paragraphs. Each of these paragraphs is making a strong point, but we don't need to include all of the reasons behind it, right? We can go straight to the information that is relevant for our purposes in answering our question, and in so doing, and after we do that, we can then place in parentheses the citation, right? We don't have to report on the full source in our text. We can just say, this is true, and here's my citation that supports that truth, right? And then this is also true, and here's my citation that supports that truth. You'll see this actually come out when you start including multiple in-text citations within a single sentence. Something along the lines of, because we know that X citation, and also others have shown that Y citation, in conjunction with Z citation, we can conclude that here is my opinion that these things support. So what do we do with that? Now I'm free to type for my own thoughts and opinions, right? So keep that structure in mind, as it's not your job to rewrite the essay or to completely paraphrase the source that you are including, unless that's information that your reader absolutely needs. Instead, what you can do is you can say, here's the relevant bit. Okay, so let's structurally overall, we have a section on teenagers and what it's like for teenagers to, like, what psychosocial factors are for teenagers, right? And then we have a section on teenagers are more they're impulsive because they're more sensitive to reward, right? And in this one, we know this is saying that certain fears are universal, heights, darkness, things like that. However, it's also possible for culture to select for certain fears, right? And to culturally push us towards certain fears. And then this is an argument about the culture of the United States and how United States culture is trending towards something that is generally more secular, more Enlightenment rationality, although I don't know when this article was written. I think that's reversing. But that there's a strong foundation of traditional values and we're not likely to see a ton of change. And that daring and dangerous activity has been celebrated in the United States traditionally, and therefore that might also be a thing that encourages people to seek out, these sensation-seeking people, to seek out risks, to go run with the bulls or something like that. Does anybody, just quick show of hands, you can do this at home too, people listening, who would like to go running with the bulls in Spain? Like, I would go running with the bulls, that sounds fun. I think it sounds terrible, right? It mixes two of my least favorite things, getting gored by a giant animal and running. How terrible these things are. Actually, really, I like running. I just haven't done it in a long time. It's hard to like running when you haven't done it in a long time. It's easier to like it when you have done it more recently. Okay, so we've got a section up here. I'm actually going to insert comments. Is it, what's the hotkey for that? Oh, wow, that's not what that's supposed to look like. Oh, I've done it. There we go. Okay. And I'll zoom back out here just a little bit. Okay. So what do I want? Man, I'm going to have to zoom out really far. This is a silly amount of space to do that comment. Okay. So what's the point of this one again? We're talking about teenagers, right? Well, let's try to spell again. Psychosocial. What was the thing they compete with in here? Cognitive control networks. Okay. So we've got this down to a sentence, right? And I think we've got the core stuff there. Psychosocial factors like peer pressure can encourage risk-taking, and they compete with cognitive control networks, which help produce risk-taking behaviors. Now, is this research specifically about teenagers? Yes, it is. However, the structure of psychosocial versus cognitive control is a universal structure. It's just the author Steinberg is saying teenagers tend to lean a little bit too much on the psychosocial, right? Insert comment. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll put my... I've got to get the fancy A. Hold on. Okay. Oh no, wrong button. So, okay, we've got here, first is psychosocial factors versus cognitive control, especially true of teens who have an increased sense of reward. We're going to have to rearrange the structure, but that's okay. We're just getting our paraphrases out there. We're just paraphrasing. Command enter to post, yes. Now I'll go down to this one. Biologically relevant fears, evolutionary fears, social fear. Okay. Awesome. Spiders are yucky, aren't they? I just think spiders are terrifying. Like fear of heights. We'll just do one example. Constructed. There. We need to edit this comment. I don't think we need this. I won't lie. Okay, so let me talk about why I don't think we need this section from Ronald Englehart and Wayne Baker. Everything we're talking about here is primarily about the mechanisms of control, right? Whether it's psychosocial, whether it's psychological, or whether it's biological, right? And what the relationship between those things is. This information is useful if we are going to be making like culturally specific recommendations, which you could argue that we are, since the audience is going to be primarily, from the U.S., since that's where it's being written. But this feels like it belongs in a different essay to me. It feels to me like this section right here is about how to flip the switches and controls on American culture specifically in order to increase or decrease risk-taking behavior. So I would argue that this doesn't need to be here at all. Daring and dangerous acts have a history of being celebrated in American culture, which can breed daredevils. American media frequently promotes people who take risks and push their limitations. I think praising daredevils... Okay, where's this? So we have something that's a bit confusing here, right? One is, I think... And then we have American culture allows sensation seekers to excel. So this is, I would need to go back and read the Lynham and Miller source, but this is generally speaking, by the way, true, that in the United States, risk-taking is rewarded much more than in other nations. And this is for a number of reasons. One of those is because our absolutely just like hot garbage of a social safety net, right? When you have a terrible social safety net, you have a lot of people taking risks. How many of you know a SoundCloud rapper, right? Or are one, perhaps? I'm not trying to diss anybody. I'm saying this is a feature of the culture. If opportunity for advancement is relatively rare or certainly non-linear, and if there's no social safety net, people who are in higher risk environments take bigger risks themselves, right? If the odds are not good for you, you take risks. If you know you have a nice job lined up, and it will provide you with a nice income, and if you don't move out of your town, then you can just hang out with your family, and it will all be nice, and then you'll die when you're 78, right? And that'll be good enough. If there's no real threat, no real risk-taking, right? And you can think of this from an adaptive standpoint. Why take unnecessary risks if you're in a peaceful environment? But if you're in a high-risk environment, then you take risks. There's actually a really interesting paper about this, about the biological differences of people raised in high-risk versus low-risk environments. You actually start puberty earlier if you're in a high-risk environment. Your body says, I need to be ready to be an adult. There's all sorts of really interesting ways that your physiology, your biology reacts to your environment. It's not like a static thing. Huzzah epigenetics. And all of that. I'm an English teacher, so I won't get too far into it because, what do I know? Don't cite me on anything related to biology. Except that I slept through my biology class in high school. I did do that. Me and Hampton Snap. So, what about this section? Should this be here? I would argue yes. Now, how is this different from the previous section? Ultimately, it's not exceptionally difficult, except to say that this one feels more about a certain, this one feels like it's more about a specific set of values we're talking about, and this is more generic. So I would actually probably end up using this as an introduction, right? So let's go ahead and insert our comment here. And on this one, I think we would say, move over. We won't say promotes, we'll say celebrates those who take risks. Okay. I think these are our core things that we need to say. We need to say that American culture celebrates those who take risks. We need to say some psychosocial factors are universal, like fear of heights. Others are socially or culturally constructed. We say teens have an increased sense of reward from psychosocial factors. And psychosocial factors like peer pressure can encourage risk-taking. All right, these are our elements. How do we factor these together? Let's actually go back to the revision itself and see where this information begins. Well, let's read our introduction and see if it fits right after that. Testosterone and adrenaline are released. Your vision narrows. Your heart rate increases. Oxygen floods your brain, and for 60 seconds you feel something. Then a wave of new chemicals elevating your mood. Why take risks? Because, as Allegra Ringo argues, this is the reward. But why are some people more inclined to take risks while others are completely risk averse? There's no one answer, but biology, psychology, and psychosocial and cultural factors all play a role. Okay. And we'll switch back to our other document. Now that we have that as a baseline, let's go back over to document 1. Peer pressure we need a citation here, right? No, don't. I'm not done writing. I don't want a peer yet. So who's our citation for this first one? Steinberg. Peer pressure can outcompete underdeveloped cognitive control networks. And provide That's really redundant. We've got something we can eliminate there, don't we? In the United States and among youth in particular, risk-taking is celebrated. Peer pressure. In the United States, risk-taking is celebrated. Peer pressure can outcompete underdeveloped cognitive control networks and provide a neurochemical reward, especially in teens who are more sensitive to psychosocial factors, which is the source of Galvan. Get back here, Galvan. Oh, goodness. There we go. Some of these rewards are we'll do the one actually. And then we'll put a quote here. This is Higgins, right? Okay, so now we've gotten all our information that we need from each of these sources. Now, each of these sources obviously says more than what we've put here. However, we've given ourselves the core of what they are saying as a baseline, and now we get to speak what we think about it, right? So, if we are looking at mechanisms of control, right, this is then we've arrived at this point where we've got like a chance to have an opinion. I will tell you mine. So, in the United States, it's celebrated. Peer pressure. Okay, I think the interesting question this raises then is what type of cultural thing, what cultural norms are we celebrating for teens that promotes risk-taking behavior? what elements of our culture celebrate and promote that, right? I would say the biggest one for me is, of course, football, right, and cheerleading. These are two massive, like, culturally celebrated things that go hand in hand, along with, like eating popcorn and drinking Coke at the games, right? Or no, ballpark hot dogs. That's what people eat. I don't go to sporting stuff usually. Do people eat hot dogs at football games or just baseball games? Like, what do people eat at football games? Fries? Nachos? Nachos feels pretty universal, doesn't it? Yeah, with the fake cheese. That stuff is so gross. I love nachos, but man, that's okay. Okay, so to me this raises an No. It doesn't raise a question. What is it? As some are tolerable and some are not. So I'm struggling here with how to transition out of this. That's better. Okay. Let's read this paragraph then. In the United States, risk-taking is celebrated. Peer pressure can outcompete cognitive control networks and provide a neurochemical reward, especially in teens who are more sensitive to psychosocial factors. Some psychosocial factors are universal, like fear of heights, but others are culturally constructed. This provides us with one mechanism for controlling risk-seeking behavior, especially among the most vulnerable. We need an example of a culturally constructed psychosocial factor. I think this is appropriate. Yeah. I mean, again, this is a section where you're getting my personal bias, but this is when you should be getting my personal bias, right? I have cited material. I have laid a background based on this material. This is my opinion, which is, coming from this stuff, right? Given this, I believe this. So it's perfectly fine to have this here. So do I think that cheerleading should be considered a sport so that it can be regulated? Absolutely. Do I think that football should remove all pads so people don't do helmet-to-helmet contact? Absolutely. I don't have a problem with playing football. I just think you should take all the pads off, which would make it safer. And isn't that counterintuitive, right? That taking all the pads off would make football safer?
Look at rugby, for example.
Yeah.
Getting hit.
They are, but it's not. Your body gets wrecked, yes. But it's not the same as when you have a helmet on and you're hitting your head constantly. Like they avoid head collisions. And it's also like in boxing, right? Have you heard the phrase take the gloves off? As like, to make it more vicious or more brutal? No, the gloves let you hit harder. They add weight to your hands and protect your hands. It's not like soft, right? Those gloves are heavy. That's what causes the brain damage. Bare knuckle boxing is way safer than boxing with gloves on. Boxers tape their hands, then put them in these big heavy weights. Like, now my hands can't be hurt. Give me your skull. Let me turn your brain into mashed potatoes. Right? Bare knuckle boxing is safer. Football without pads is safer. We've got something here, and at this point we've departed some from what the author originally said, but that's intentional in that I've taken the author's material, shrunk it down. All of this, by the way, all that. And then a paragraph that I deleted, we got through the relevant stuff in that. Okay? So we shrunk this down a lot. And then we had room to have an opinion. So now let's hop back over to revision 3. And we can replace all of the yellow with what we just did. There's more yellow down here. Where are we at? We're down to 1,173 words. Okay, so we have, this started, by the way, at 2,200 this morning. So we've already cut it in half. We're on 1,173, but we can go further. So let's make sure we've got our formatting set up correctly, because this is double-spaced in the actual document. And then let's take our blue. Come here, you biology blue. Is that all the biology blue? Nope, there's more biology blue. Biology blue in document 2. I haven't slept a whole lot. Mitch Hedberg said, I haven't slept for 3 days. That would be too long. I need to go get my Red Bull. It's getting rough. All right. Let's go ahead and set this up like we want. We want to remove the highlighting, and then we want to make it single spaced so it's easier to read all together. I like to read it that way. Okay, and let's now read this one. How much time do we have? It's 1:30. We have like 30 minutes left, right? No, like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Whatever. Marvin Zuckerman is a recognized expert in sensation-seeking behavior and is well known for his research on the psychobiological basis of human personality. He defines sensation-seeking as a human trait characterized by the need for varied, novel, and complex sensations and experiences, and the willingness to take physical and social risks for the sake of such experience. Like doing stand-up comedy, by the way. Can you imagine getting up on stage and being like, now I'm going to make you laugh? What a horrifying experience that would be. In his work, The Psychophysiology on Sensation Seeking, Zuckerman argues that, my guess is that's of, I don't know, we'd have to go check. Zuckerman argues that sensation seeking is a personality trait that is linked to a range of behavioral and health outcomes. He highlights the intricate relationship between genetics and environmental variables by suggesting that those with the sensation seeking trait come from ancestors who found novel stimuli as sources of biological rewards. The opposite of this trait is sensation avoidance, which Zuckerman suggests are ancestors of those who found novel stimuli to be threats to survival. In simple terms, Zuckerman provides a theory that through evolution, the two different reactions to novel stimuli have come to create both sensation seekers and avoiders. He concludes by saying that high sensation seekers have higher thresholds for intense stimuli and seek to challenge their stimuli, while lows tend to shut down. What? Okay, I think I know what that means. Jamie Derringer and colleagues study predicting sensation seeking from dopamine genes, a candidate system approach. Examines the connection between genes that control dopamine signaling and sensation seeking behavior. The researchers hypothesized that individual variations in dopamine activity, which is critical for processing rewards and driving motivation, are thought to be a factor in sensation-seeking behavior. In their research study, 635 adults were involved who completed the sensation-seeking scale, or SSS, which is a self-report measure of sensation-seeking behavior. Researchers chose 5 dopamine signaling-related genes to study and employed a candidate system strategy in which a group of genes is chosen based on their biological relevance to the trait of interest, which obviously in this case is sensation-seeking. According to the study's findings, variations in 2 specific genes, COMT and DRD4, are linked to higher scores, indicating higher levels of sensation-seeking behavior. Overall, the work offers proof that genetic diversity in genes involved in dopamine signaling is linked to behavior that seeks out sensations. The study also emphasized how crucial it is to take into account gene-environment interactions when researching intricate traits such as sensation-seeking behavior. One type of specific sensation that researchers focused on is fear. It is logical to assume that reactions to fearful and novel experiences are similar. Allegra Ringo writes an article for The Atlantic explaining why some people enjoy the feeling of being scared while others strongly avoid it. Fear in this context comes in the form of haunted houses and horror movies. Ringo uses research from David Zoll to argue that enjoying fear is based on brain chemistry rather than personal choice. Further, some people's response to fear releases extra dopamine in the brain, which allows some to love the thrill while others don't. The final piece of information I find helpful in this article is Ringo's analysis of how social constructs affect fear across cultures. Okay. We don't need that last paragraph. The reason we don't need it is twofold. First, because we are having one author talk, we're having the opinion of this author who wrote this, talking about the opinion of an author who is writing about another author. And if we wanted this to be authoritative and appropriate for an academic paper, we wouldn't talk about Ringo's opinion on Zold, we would talk about Zold, right? We'd go back to that original source. Presumably, writing for The Atlantic, Ringo cited her sources, or at least mentioned, enough to track them down. And so we would track down the original source and talk about that. Two, if you look back at the original document, we already cited Ringo about risks and rewards. So we've got that citation in there. Three, when we redid this section, we talked about culture, which is the tie-in here, but we removed some of the pieces from that paragraph that would make this section necessary in the bio blue. Right? And so we can just go ahead and get rid of this. And you'll see that the things that I'm getting rid of in each case, like the whole paragraphs, are actually kind of similar, right? It's areas that are going specifically in a direction that the paper actually isn't going anymore. Now, before we gave the paper, or actually revealed the paper's very specific direction, it wasn't abundantly clear what belonged and what didn't. There's also the fact that these various elements are kind of scattered throughout the paper. But once we have removed the false introduction, identified the actual direction of the paper, combined the sections on psychosocial and culture into one, summarized that into a small section, which we then commented on, now it becomes clear that some things are in and some things are out. We have narrowed our scope. We have limited the range of what we are talking about, right? Imagine trying to cook a meal, if you will, and it's kind of like an Italian and Mexican and Chinese crossover, but you're doing it with, it's paleo and also dairy-free. This meal sounds terrible, right? There are great dairy-free meals. There are great paleo meals. My favorite paleo meal is steak on plate. It's a really good one. There are good Italian meals, good Chinese meals, and of course, I'm a big fan of fusion. Who doesn't love a Korean taco? But you can't do everything all at once, or it kind of lacks direction. You need some direction in there. You can't do all of these different things, right? You don't want something that is both a dessert and a main course and a starter, right? You're just eating melted ice cream, I guess. That's the closest thing I can come up with, just like chocolate soup. It doesn't sound too bad. But anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? We need to narrow our scope. Once we've narrowed our scope, some things are in, some things are out. Is this a bad paragraph? No, it's not a bad paragraph. Is it bad writing? Absolutely not. We're not deleting it because it's bad. We're deleting it because it has become a vestigial limb on our paper. We have narrowed to the point that we no longer need this. Goodbye? All right. So this is talking about the biology, sort of what happens. This one, let's see. Let's go to our comments and zoom way back out. Way back out. So annoying. Okay. In some environments, we're borrowing some language from the original here, which is good. You always want to do that. Okay, we may have included too much information there. We can leave it, we'll leave it for now, but that may be too much info. Oh, no, this works out really well. Okay, so there's a range, we're saying there's a range of how prone they are to sensation-seeking behavior. Good. One such range, we can say in this section, is the sensation-seeking scale. Is Jamie Derringer a boy or a girl? Tough call. Jamie's one of those gender-neutral names. We'll go with the singular they. If we had more time, by the way, it would be a simple like Google search. I guarantee you, if this person's doing research, they've got a faculty page, right? So we could just go find out. Derringer and their colleagues. Once a transition. Connected to Okay, sorry, I'm going ahead and typing the rest of this out here. But basically what I'm wanting to say based on these two sections is fundamentally we have, in the first part, the psychosocial and cultural factors. In the second part, we have the genetic factors. Very true, but this isn't a question of biology versus nurture. It's not nature versus nurture, right? It is nature and nurture. Or the same psychosocial factors that can make you feel peer pressure are the same kind of things that actually can alter the genes and the way they express themselves, right? So I believe that is implied here as well. So they also emphasize, though, the strong relationship between environment and genetic expression and then that's where we'll put our citation. And that just needs to be a page number. And we actually need another page number citation here because those are definitely not going to be in the same section. Let me edit it. Can I edit it? No. Oh, another comment is in progress. That's why. Wow. A terrible system. We need our citation here. Zuckerman. There we go. Okay. All right, and then our in other words section here. That'll be our own opinion. So let's go ahead and drop this down here. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do. Oh, I didn't copy this one yet. Oof. Mash destination formatting for sure. That's terrible looking. All right, this is our new section right here. Let's single space this. What? Well, I've got a double thing here, don't I? There it is. Okay. In other words, all right, so now we've got our citations done. We've got Zuckerman, we've got Derringer, we've got multiple page numbers for Derringer. So in other words, while genetics play a role in determining risk-seeking behavior, or what are we saying? We're saying sensation-seeking behavior? There we go. That's fine. That's a good summary. Great. Now let's drop that back in. So remember, this is replacing all of our blue sections. All of the blue. All right, and let's see, what are we down to now? 770 words. So from 2,240 down to 770. And you might say, like, Grant, you are taking out a lot of information here. And you're right. I am taking out a lot of information. But it's factual information that's already been published in other essays, in other research. And the places where it has been published, it also has things like the methodology behind that research. So if we're actually interested in all of the facts together just for the sake of the information purely, then we would want to go to the research article. But again, since we're not performing any research, we don't have a lab, we're not doing experiments, we're writing an essay motivated towards a specific audience, we need to pick and choose what we include, right? So while I am getting rid of a lot of things, I'm doing so by narrowing and specifying my scope a little bit better. All right, we're going to save this last pink section for my next class. And what we'll do is we will revise that, and then we will tack on a new conclusion. And I think we'll get the whole thing down to, 600. Or sorry, no, we can't get it down to 600. We'll get it down to maybe about 650 words, including the works cited page. We can get rid of some of those citations too, I think, that we've cut out. We'll see. But this is, this is now part 2.
Okay, so I don't have a ton of time to get this third part in. I'm sorry that I messed up the third the third part of the recording. The first time that I did that, it's really delayed this a lot. But I've got here up on the screen essentially the result of that third revision. So we've got the final section here, which is the psychology section. This is pink in the original document. If you want to look here, right? It's this final section here. And so this section is in the original document. Let's see, let me see, is it going to tell me how many words are highlighted? It should. We're at 319 words, and I think that we can revise this down reasonably to 64. And so that's a pretty significant reduction. But let me just read through. You can, if you want to pause here and read through that section above, that's fine, but I'm going to read through this bottom section. Frank Farley describes thrill-seeking personalities, type T, where the T stands for thrills, in terms of positive or negative manifestations. The thrill can be criminal behavior, but can also be creativity, a willingness to do things differently. In other words, thrill-seeking isn't inherently good or bad as a psychological trait. Instead, it's something that can be channeled towards positive or negative ends. Okay, and if you look at what we've stripped away from this above section, it's essentially the specific examples that are, I think, probably very relevant if talking about type T personalities is the point of your paper. But in our paper, it's not necessarily the function. And so if we drop this back in instead of what we have originally, so let's just copy and paste this over. Where's the rest of our text? There we go. We are now down to 527 words, including our works cited page. We probably do need a conclusion on this to put kind of a button on it, but it's going to be pretty clear what it is. So let's just look now essentially at the outline of the paper that we have, and then we can see where we're going from there. All right. So our initial question is, why are some people more inclined to take risks while others are completely risk averse? And then we answer it, we say we're going to answer it in three ways: with biology, psychology, and psychosocial and cultural factors. Okay, and cultural factors. So we have our psychosocial and cultural factors first, right? And this is where we say essentially, there's some universals, and then it's also culturally modified. And so what we praise or we say is bad can determine that sort of culturally. Then we talk about biology. We talk about how it's genetically motivated. That some people are more naturally prone than others. And there's a scale for that. But those genetics manifest based on environment. And then finally, we talk about how this trait can be viewed positively, or it manifests positively or negatively. And so where I would end here, the way I would conclude this, is essentially by asking the question, how should we, what's the exact phrasing I want to do here? It's not that. Okay, so this is a terrible sentence, which we want to revise. But this is essentially the question I'm going to seek to answer, right? What kind of environments result in the best expression of thrill-seeking behavior, and how can we encourage or manifest those environments? And I say seek to answer. I'm not going to actively try and answer this here because it's beyond the scope of this paper, right? And so what I might end up saying is something along the lines of, at the end here, because environmental factors play a role in genetic expression and and the cultural expression and in the psychological expression, that bending these towards positive ends tends to is the result of a certain environment, then that needs to be where we are focusing our attention. And so while it is beyond the scope of this paper to recommend a specific environment, we can say that adjusting thrill-seeking behavior at the level of the individual is probably not something that would be beneficial for policy or for community goals or anything like that, that we need to be focusing at the level of the environment. And that would be my conclusion, right? That would be the conclusion of that paper. And so then we have our works cited that we've talked about. I think we'd probably get up to about 700 words, maybe 800 there, but that's a significant reduction overall. And again, I did cut a lot of material here. There's a lot of stuff that I ended up cutting out of this paper, and it was a lot of good stuff too. But the reason that stuff went by the wayside, I know I've sort of beaten this horse to death here. But the reason that went by the wayside is because we narrowed our focus, and once we had a specific goal that we were trying to achieve, it was much clearer what helped or hindered that goal. And so we could get rid of things that were good but didn't necessarily move us towards our goal. Okay, I know that's been a very long lecture. I'm going to try to get this up on YouTube now. Thank you guys if you stuck around to the end, and hopefully this has helped you find ways to cut your own paper, keeping in mind that this has been extended through Wednesday. Thanks so much.